Since we have a whole roster of saints and martyrs in the calendar of the Roman Catholic Church, it is not unusual for priests to have copies of the books of the lives of the saints in their oratories. They come in handy, especially when we prepare homilies for solemnities and memorials of saints. Aside from these volumes on the usual canonized saints, I also have in my collection this book by Robert Ellsberg entitled All Saints and subtitled Reflections on Saints, Prophets, and Witnesses of Our Time. You know what I love about this book is that in addition to the usual canonized saints, Robert Ellsberg has included in this particular volume some people who have not been officially canonized. In fact, some of them are not even Catholics or Christians, but the kind of lives that they had lived are just as edifying and as marked by holiness and authentic witnessing as those of our canonized saints. They are also a good reminder to us, wala naman tayong monopoly of sanctity. Just browse through its table of contents, and you will be surprised to find in his table of contents the names of people like the Impressionist painter Vincent van Gogh, the Indian hero Mahatma Gandhi, the Protestant theologian Karl Barth, the philosopher Martin Buber, the German who saved many Jews in the time of the Holocaust, Oskar Schindler, the Italian Jesuit missionary Matteo Ricci, and the Latin American bishop Dom Helder Camara. For today, November 26, which happens to be Thanksgiving Day in the United States, he has in his list a black slave born in New York and who died on this day, November 26, in 1883. Her original name was Isabella, but later she renamed herself Sojourner Truth after she declared her own freedom from slavery. Isabella was born to slave parents and was sold to many different owners, many of whom were very cruel and abusive. She was later given in marriage to an older slave so that she could raise more children who would also become slaves. As Isabella grew up, she imbibed her own mother's religiosity as a Christian, and later she would narrate that her only source of consolation and strength whenever she was beaten up and she suffered cruelty in the hands of her masters was Jesus. She said every day she spoke to Jesus. And in her prayer, she felt that Jesus also spoke to her like a personal friend. And that Jesus promised her that one day she would be free. And she held on to that promise. In 1843, Isabella ran away from slavery after her own children had also been sold into slavery. And she assumed a new identity as a runaway slave. She called herself Sojourner Truth. She went around as an itinerant preacher. Apparently, although she was illiterate, she remembered just by rote memory all the Bible passages that she had heard in church since she was a child. She went around preaching about a God who wanted to put an end to the enslavement of the blacks in the United States, the oppression of women, and social injustice. She became a powerful voice for the abolitionist cause in America, which eventually led to the Civil War. In 1864, she traveled to Washington to meet with Abraham Lincoln and to thank him for taking up the cause of slaves and to encourage him in his abolitionist cause. She also volunteered to take care of former slaves who had run away from their masters and assured them that their bondage was about to come to an end. She was considered as one of the most influential women of her day, an illiterate, a black woman, a former slave, who preached powerfully about God's justice. You know, she was there when the war ended on December 12, 1865, and the Congress ratified the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, abolishing slavery in the United States of America. I thought about the experience of this black woman, Sojourner Truth, as I reflected on today's readings early this morning. The first reading from the book of Revelation prophesies the fall of the great harlot Babylon, which was actually a code name for the oppressive Roman Empire, the triumph of God's justice, and the day when the slaves were to be vindicated. And in the gospel, Jesus speaks about fearful signs, all the disasters and calamities that were happening around them. He spoke about these as a mere preparation for something wonderful that was coming about. The writer is borrowing from Daniel chapter 7, where we read about the four beasts or the four monsters that are about to be destroyed, and an enigmatic figure whom he simply calls one who looks human, as against the ones who look like beasts. It is, of course, a prophecy about Christ as the one who will redeem humankind. He says, they will see the one who looks human coming in a cloud and with power and great glory. It is He who will bring about the birthing of a new humanity, a more authentic humanity, who will restore the basic goodness and the nobility of humanity as originally designed by God. Although we believe in the coming of a literal end time, I am inclined to think that we would have to deal with many, many end times in this world before the literal end would come about. Human history has been marked by many transition periods which have always been accompanied by some or by so much pain and suffering, so much violence and death. But always, they have only served as prelude for the emergence of something new, of something better, of something more hopeful, something truly wonderful.